Hello YouTube, and around 2 years ago, a small company by the name of Retro Fighters put out a Kickstarter to make a supposed good and or modern version of the Nintendo 64 controller. You know, get rid of that whole three-prong thing. And ever since this thing came out, people have pretty much been in agreement that this is the best controller for the Nintendo 64. And I disagree. I don't like this controller very much. Why? Well, let's find out on today's video.
So I decided to break this controller down into two parts. Basically, the first part is the good, and the second part is the bad. So starting out with the good naturally, so the controller feels good. Now, that might sound a little bit weird, but let me just say it feels like a modern game controller, not like the Nintendo 64 weird three-prong controller thing going on, you know, that monstrosity. So it doesn't have that. It has a fairly decent D-pad. It's kind of like a modern game controller D-pad, so it's not the best, but it's decent for what it is. The buttons are a little plasticky, but the one thing that I really want to compliment on this thing is the thumbstick. It has that, you know, GameCube controller thumbstick where it's nice and clicky, it hits the edges and everything. It makes that really nice clicky sound. Here, take a listen.
So my first complaint with this controller comes from, of all things, the cord length. So in case you guys can't really tell, this cord is only around 3 feet. So they don't give you very much cord to play with at all. And if you're like me and you don't sit directly in front of your TV, it's not exactly the most comfortable situation to have. My next problem with this controller is, well, the build quality. For starters, the controller, even though it feels good in the hands and everything, it doesn't feel solid. By that I mean, if you just tap on it, you can hear all the empty plastic. I honestly think that if I dropped this controller, it would probably explode. The next problem is the build quality itself is kind of shaky. So here I have with me a first wave Retro Fighters Brawler 64 pad, and this was the one that was given to us Kickstarter backers. And look at how we were rewarded. We were given a controller that's defective, because if you push up on the thumbstick, you will not be able to trigger the L button correctly, and sometimes the L button even gets stuck. So for one of my favorite Nintendo 64 games, Sin and Punishment, this is a huge deal breaker, because you pretty much need the L button to jump. In fact, the game was designed with using the D-pad and thumbstick and L and Z button in mind. Now I know what you're thinking, well, Bandicoot, that's probably just a first wave controller problem, right? Well, this right here is a second wave controller. They gave these out for free to Kickstarter backers as an apology of sorts. So you'd imagine they got everything right this time, right? Well, again, the build quality. Listen to this. Hear that squeaking? That's not supposed to sound like that. I don't think I need to explain to anyone why a controller shoulder button should not sound like that at all. That does not sound good. And if you want to believe something crazier, I've only been playing with this controller for roughly 2 weeks. I literally took this pad out of the plastic 2 weeks ago to play with it for this video. So Retro Fighters build quality I find to be pretty spotty.
Another complaint that I have with this controller, besides the fact that it just feels cheaply made, is that it's overpriced. So when these things were on Kickstarter, they were only $30 shipped, which I feel like is a pretty fair price generally speaking. But now, ever since the Kickstarters ended, it's now going for $40, which I just feel is way too much for one of these things, because for comparison's sake, a PlayStation 4 controller only goes for around $45, and think about all of the new technology that's in a PlayStation 4 controller and compare it to something like this that's fairly simple for comparison's sake. Also, there's no transfer pack capability with this thing at all, so if you want to play Pokemon Stadium or something like that, you're not going to be doing it on this controller either, and I felt like mentioning that because, well, it's not mentioned anywhere on the box, sadly enough, or even on the Amazon page.
So overall, can I recommend the Retro Fighters Brawler 64 pad? Honestly, no. It goes for $40, which is just way too much, like I said. The build quality, this thing feels cheap, honestly speaking. Like I said, it feels like if I drop it, it's going to die. And on top of that all, I mean, they're not using high-grade parts, like I said. I have a messed up shoulder button on my Model 2 version. So, overall, unless you really, really hate the Nintendo 64 controller, I just can't recommend this as a full replacement or anything like that, sadly enough. I feel like Retro Fighters really dropped the ball, truthfully speaking, which is really disappointing. But yeah, so that wraps up this episode of Controller Chaos. If you guys like this video, like it down below, comment, subscribe, all that normal big YouTuber energy stuff. Have a wonderful day, you guys, and peace.